Good evening, everyone. It's Paul Kakabine at the Garland County Library, and I'm here once again to introduce a program by Eli Vega. He's in the past recently done programs on photography and how to build your own course, and those videos are still available if you'd like to go back and check them out. But tonight, Mr. Vega is here to give us a presentation on how to win a job interview. So Eli Vega has had a long and successful career in the field of human resources. He held several positions along the way. In addition to being an HR executive, he was a recruiter with major multi-billion-dollar corporations, as well as with city, county, and state employers. He has interviewed literally hundreds of job candidates, and as he puts it, I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. So Mr. Vega knows what employers look for, and in other words, he knows what he's talking about. Please welcome Eli Vega.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you so much. Paul, you can go ahead and start the presentation now.
Okay, it's ready when you are. Just have to hit present.
All right.
And you might, let's see, expert on job interviews, but not Google slideshows. We had to convert the presentation for you.
I know all about interviewing, but not as much about Google Drive.
Yes. Do you see present in the top right there next to the share button, the yellow share button in the top right?
Preset. I don't see preset.
Are you on the tab at the top? You're on your slideshow?
I see StreamYard.com.
Yeah, the tab that's untitled presentation.
Okay. Okay. There we go.
There we go. Perfect.
All right. Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome. Absolutely.
Sorry about that. All right. Well, here we go. My name is Eli Vega, as Paul introduced me. And yes, I know it sounds kind of cocky, but I know what I'm talking about. I have been in human resources. That was my former life. And during that time, 20 plus years, I saw hundreds of interviews, hundreds of job candidates, and as Paul said, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Actually, I saw the very good and the very ugly and everything in between. Now, let me set the stage and put this presentation in its proper perspective. Now, to get a job, to find a job, and get that job requires 4 different phases, 4 different steps. And today, we're just going to talk about one of those 4 steps. So please keep that in mind. The other steps are, you got to have a great resume. You've got to have a great cover letter attached to that resume. And there's also the job search. In addition to the resume and cover letter, there's the job search. How do I go about finding jobs, and which jobs? How do I look for them? So those are 3 distinct, separate steps that are involved even before the interview. The interview comes after all that. I prepared my resume, my cover letter, I've done my job search, and then I get a phone call. And they say, hey, can you come in for the interview? And this is what today is all about. Just that, the 4th of 4 points. So I'm going to talk about this 4th point, which is you've been called to the interview. So let me share some key points. Now, I might use some very bold language here, perhaps strong, but I do it to just re-emphasize how important this is. It's not just a matter of getting up in the morning and say, okay, here we go. So let me give you some tips, and I'm going to talk over them a little bit and give you some more detail as we go through it. And please feel free to post some questions for Paul. I believe you can do that. And then he will read those questions to me at the end of the presentation, and I will entertain those questions. So here we go. Research the employer. How critical it is. Research the employer. Do your research. Find out something about the employer. And this is going to become more evident as I go through this. Read the copy of the job posting. If you see a job posting online, print it. Print it out. If you see a job posting in a newspaper, print it. You're going to need that to prepare for the interview because you're going to be looking for what I call buzzwords. And you want to pick up on those buzzwords. And you're going to maybe change, adopt, adjust your resume, and maybe even use some of those buzzwords. But when it comes to the interview, you want to make sure that you pick up on those buzzwords and that you use those same buzzwords that are on the job posting. If it says we're looking for somebody creative, that's a buzzword. Make sure that during your interview, you're going to talk about how creative you can be. And again, if possible, find out who you're going to be interviewing with. And the reason that's important is because you want to keep the interview personal, informal, and just be talking to them and say, for example, John, in your department, et cetera, et cetera. So make it sound like you're in their living room, just talking to them about yourself, your skills, your abilities, your background, et cetera. So find out, if possible, who you're going to be interviewing with and or their titles, preferably both. And yes, find out where is the interview going to be. It might not be the first or the same building you dropped off your resume, or it might not be at their main headquarters. Some companies have more than one building, more than one location. So make sure you know exactly where you're going to go for the interview. It's going to be very embarrassing to say, I'm sorry, I'm 15 minutes late, but I wasn't sure where to go. And again, this goes back to your buzzwords and that job posting. Make sure that you look at it so that you can prepare yourself with some questions, anticipate some questions. And that job posting will give you a lot of clues as to what they might ask you. They're going to ask you something related to that job, and maybe something related to their department or their company. And pay attention to how you will appear. Please, I cannot stress this enough. And I'm sharing this with you from experience, okay? I've seen too much of this stuff. I have seen people overdress or underdress. I have seen a candidate who was applying for a PhD level position show up in blue jeans. And I'm going, whoa. And I have seen people overdress, get way too fancy. And please, for this interview, for any interview, no perfume or cologne. You're not going to a nightclub. You're going to a job interview, and you don't want any distractions. I've had candidates where just as they walked in the room, I could smell their perfume. Way too strong. So easy on that, okay? And easy on the lipstick and the earrings. Please keep it down. No huge earrings. Again, you're not going to a nightclub, not going to a bar, you're not on a date, you're going for a job interview, okay? And please turn off that mobile phone. I'm going to share a story with you, a real life story. We had a job candidate once. She walks in, puts her purse down, and we're interviewing her. And just a few minutes into the interview, her cell phone goes off. And what does she do? No, she doesn't say, oh, I'm so sorry, I forgot to turn it off. No, she grabs into her purse, grabs the cell phone, and says, excuse me. And she walks out of the room to answer the call. And then she comes in, and we continue the interview. I don't need to tell you that she did not get the job. And have a notebook, a pen to take notes. Even if you don't take many notes, do that anyway, because it's going to appear that you are very organized. You're ready for the interview. You want to take notes. They notice that about you. And Besides everything else that you're going to say, just that alone, for them, it reflects that, oh, we have a person here who is very organized, very eager to talk to us, and she's going to take notes. Don't slouch in the chair. Have good posture. I don't have to say too much about that. And yeah, have good eye contact. I've had people interview and they're looking down at their notes. They're not focusing. Maybe they're nervous. But what you want to do is have eye contact as you're talking. Move around the room. If there's a panel of 2 or 3 people, move around the room with your eyes, with your face. Look at them, talk to them. Again, just pretend that you're in their living room and you're just chatting with them, and they just want to get to know you. They just want to know a little bit more about you. Don't talk badly about your employer or past employers. I've heard too much of that. I've had people talk about their employers, how bad they were, and so on. That's not necessary. It's not needed. It's not good. And it's not going to fare well for you during the interview. And please, please, this is your interview too. It's not just their interview. This is your interview too. Not only are they looking for a good person, not only are they looking for a good candidate, but you're also looking for the best employer. So make sure that you ask questions. It's okay. They understand that. They do understand that. And just ask them things like, oh, I'm sorry, could you please paraphrase that? And what's that doing? That's doing 2 things for you. One is it's achieving clarity for you. Make sure you understand the question. Did I understand it correctly? The other thing it's doing for you is that if you're not quite sure how to answer that, it gives you a few more seconds, maybe another more minute to come up with some good answers for them. So please don't hesitate to ask them, could you please paraphrase that? Paraphrase that. And please be concise with your answers. Don't go on and on and on and on. As attorneys say, just answer the question, okay? And what are the, excuse me, did I go too fast here? Yeah, okay. So John, tell us a little bit about yourself. That's one of the questions that people might ask you. And again, keep it brief. Don't brag. Don't talk about personal stuff. Focus your answers on what they're asking, okay? Keep it job related. You want to make sure that when you answer every question they ask, that you leave them with the impression that, ooh, I like her. I think she'd do well in this job. So just keep that in mind. My forward button is not working like it should. Oh, this little note here on the side. It's very true that a lot of people, most people who are going to interview you are not trained interviewers. They just been asked, hey, can you help with this job interview? And John says, oh, yeah, sure. And John sits down and says, okay, who's first? So, they haven't even thought about it. They probably haven't even read the job description. They were just invited by Bob to sit in on the interview, and they accepted the invitation. So take advantage of the fact that they're not trained interviewers by you being a trained interviewee. Take advantage of that. And remember this, they're not interviewing for you. Okay, now this is going to sound very cold, but it's very true. They don't care that you're out of a job. They don't care that you're having a hard time paying your rent. They don't care that you're frustrated in your current job. They don't care about any of that. They're just looking for the best person that's going to do the job for them. So put yourself inside their head when you're interviewing, because for every question you answer, they're going to be asking themselves, what's in it for me? Okay, so it's not about you, it's about them. So please keep that in mind. Here's a good question, a very common question. What are your greatest strengths? Give answers related to the job and the company. What are your weaknesses? Now, I'm going to share something with you that you might not be expecting regarding this question. Give them what you think might seem like a weakness, but as you're talking, they see it as a strength. I'm going to show you an example in just a few minutes. Why do you want to leave your job? Again, related to what they offer that your job doesn't. Don't speak badly about your employer. Don't speak badly about what's going on in your job. Just tell them simply, straightforward, that you like challenges and you're looking for more challenge and more growth for yourself and your future. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Now, realistically, this is almost, I'll say it, almost a silly question of sorts, because if you ask them where they want to be in 5 years, they might not know it themselves. So this is a question that's very common, but at the same time, I find kind of useless. But again, if they ask you, take advantage of it. And they like to see what you have as your goals. Did you have any goals? What's your future look like? What does your future look like? So don't tell them things like, "Oh, in 5 years, I like to have my own business." Wrong answer. So they don't want to hear that. True or not, that's not a good answer. You want to give them an answer that they're looking for that makes them feel like, oh, okay, yeah, we could use this person. Of all the candidates, why should we hire you? I'm sure you've been asked that question before, and it'll show up again. You'll see it again. So highlight key interests, job duties, the achievements that are most in line with their job and their company mission. So yeah, when you do your research about the company, I'm going to go back to that point. When you do your research about the company, look at their website and see if they have a mission or a vision statement. That'll really help you to give them answers or provide comments for them that the other job candidates are not going to bother with. Things like, I noticed that on your mission statement you mentioned this. So I'm glad you do. That's a great mission, because it really ties in to what I'm all about and what I'm looking for and what I'm striving for. So they're going to be impressed with the fact that you just know something about their company. So how did you hear about this job? Well, you don't want to give them answers like, well, I was at the bar the other day and this guy told me there was a job opening. Wrong answer. So don't give them those kind of answers. Preferably just to let them know that, hey, I did some research and et cetera. I found it in the paper. I found it online and so on. So whatever your answer is, hopefully it'll reflect your self-initiative, your ability to do some research, your ability to go online and look at websites and search and search and search. That'll impress them. Tell us about your greatest career achievement. Yeah, just something along those lines that they could ask you. So give them an example that reflects KSAs. HR calls them KSAs, knowledge, skills, and abilities. And if they haven't asked you about certain knowledge, skills, or abilities that you were hoping they would ask you, now would be a good time to introduce that additional information about yourself. Tell us about your greatest career achievement, and give them what HR or some HR professionals call a STAR answer. STAR standing for tell them or share with them the situation or task. That's the ST in the acronym STAR. So share with them a situation or task that you did. Tell them about the action you took, the A in the acronym STAR. Tell them what action you took, and then follow it up with the results that came out of that project, the STAR answers. Just think about that, STAR. Now, you don't have to give them STAR answers to every question, but just only if appropriate, like this one, tell us about your greatest career achievement. Do you have reliable transportation? Now, nowadays, they really shouldn't be asking that because that can be very easily construed as illegal, discriminatory. And maybe you've heard of the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. They look at these kind of questions. So employers really shouldn't be asking those kind of questions. They should just assume that you're going to get there on time. However, if they do ask, don't push back. Don't say, "Hey, you're not supposed to ask that question." Just answer it. If you have transportation, just say, "Hey, oh no problem. I have my own transportation." Period. If you don't have your own transportation, tell them something like, "Oh, I've never had any problems getting to work on time. No, that's not a problem for me," and just leave it at that. What kind of environment do you work in best? And again, keep their job in mind. Keep their interests in mind. So please say something roughly along the lines of, "Oh, I'm pretty flexible. I enjoy either working alone on high turnaround projects, and I also like working with teams to solve problems." Now, what you've done right there with that simple answer, it was very quick, very short. It wasn't long-winded, but you've accomplished a lot in just that simple answer. You've answered their question, number one, and you told them you're flexible. They like that. They like flexibility. And you told them that you have experience in working in high turnaround projects. To them, it's going to imply that you have worked with projects that have a very tight deadline, and they like that. And you've also told them that you're good at solving problems and you're good at working with others. You're giving them all that about you from that simple question. What kind of environments do you work in best? What's in it for me? Just think about that. Always, always. And feel free to go online after this presentation or before your next job interview and research other commonly asked questions. There are tons of them out there. I've just given you some of the ones that I'm very familiar with. And whatever else you find, just remember when you practice your answers that you want to put yourself in their head, in their mind, because they're going to be asking, "What's in it for me?" Now, let me share with you some questions you can ask. So even if they don't allow you the opportunity, just ask them. To ask them, be polite about it and says, "Excuse me, would you mind if I have a few questions? If I ask you a few questions?" I don't think anybody's going to turn you down unless they're running late or unless you got long-winded and you're running everything late. But in most cases, they're going to appreciate it. They're going to say, "Yeah, sure." So one question you could ask is this position a vacancy or a newly created position? It shows interest on your part, and it also gives you yet another opportunity to tell them more about yourself. For example, when they say, "This is a newly created position," you might say something like, "Oh, great! I'm glad to hear that. That must mean that the department is expanding and that the company is doing well. I appreciate that. It excites me to know that I'm going to be coming in with a company that is expanding. So you must be doing something right. So that's great." Anything that sounds very positive, and they're going to be taking notes. Which reminds me, look for their nonverbal cues. If they put pen to pencil, that means that you're touching some buttons, some good buttons, hopefully good buttons. So they're taking notes as you're talking. Um, might be just a vacancy. If it's a vacancy, you might follow up with, so, oh, well, I'm sorry to hear that you lost one of your key personnel. You know, I like to think that I'm going to be able to fill those shoes and help the department move forward seamlessly and help the department and the company move forward. Again, anything that sounds positive, anything that sounds like you're right with them, you're in tune with them, you're thinking like them. What would you say are your greatest challenges? So that's one question you could ask. And the reasons why is the same as above. Okay. And I like that question. I like to ask that question when I'm interviewing, and I like to be asked that question when I'm the interviewer. What would you say are your greatest challenges? That's a great question. That makes me think a little bit. And I might add here that, for example, if they say something like, well, one of the greatest challenges for any incumbent in this job is meeting deadlines because we work fast around here. We work on tight deadlines and we just have to get it done as soon as possible. If they say something like that, man, that is an invitation for you to give them more stuff about yourself that's going to get you the job. Say something like, oh, that's interesting. That reminds me, and then go on into your next presentation about your interview. Tell them something like, oh, that's interesting. It reminds me, I have worked many times with those kind of projects where deadlines are a must. And sometimes I get excited about that. And I'd rather be doing that than be working in an atmosphere where things are very slow and boring. And again, don't use my own words, just use your words that piggyback on that. What would you say are the greatest challenges or key goals for the company today? And yes, spoiler alert, spoiler alert, they might not know, they might not have thought about it, but it's still a good question. What would you say are the greatest challenges or key goals for the company today? And again, these kind of questions, listen for their answers very closely, very carefully, because they might give you some clues as to what else you can add to the picture, put on the table for them. So what you're doing here by asking questions is you're opening it up for you to be able to share more information about yourself. It's not just about what they're going to say, but again, it's going to help you to expand on how good you are and how well you're going to do this job and how they just can't say no to you. And yes, always thank them for the opportunity. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you calling me in for the interview. I'm very appreciative. And whatever words you want to use, thank them for the interview. Now let's move on to what to do after the interview. Now, you might have gone in and got some information from someone, whoever coordinated the interview with you. See if you can contact them and ask them who the interviewers were and see if you can get their emails. Hopefully you can, because what I recommend is to email them a short thank you message. And yes, attach your resume and cover letter to that thank you email. And the reason for that is because you don't want to leave it up to chance for them to have lost your resume somewhere. And additionally, they don't have to go back to the computers and search for your resume. They'll say, oh, I got a thank you note from Eli. Oh, yeah. Now I can read his resume because he attached the resume. Oh, yeah, I remember Eli. Yes. So you want them to remember you. All right. as opposed to forgetting all the rest of the job candidates. By the way, let me go back. I want to mention this. When you go in person, usually when you go in for the interview, they're going to ask you to wait, right, in the lobby somewhere. Take advantage of that, because whoever the receptionist is that's just waiting there to call you in, feel free to pick her brain or his brain and just ask him just little chit chat kind of questions, and you can get some additional information from them, and also say something positive about the company. So, say something along the lines of, I went online, looked at the company, and your company sounds like a great company to work for. That kind of thing. I mean, you don't have to get over involved with the receptionist, just a few little comments like that. And the reason that might help you is because that receptionist, the person at the front desk, might very well know the interviewer or interviewers. And he or she might go to them and say, that candidate that just left, Eli Vega or John Doe, he was nice. He was very pleasant, very professional. We chatted for a while, and I like him. So she or he will add some points in your behalf. And do a self-assessment. When you go home, ask yourself what worked, what didn't. Is there a better way, or could there have been a better way for me to have answered some of those questions? Why? So, this, by going through this little process, is going to make your next interview even better. Okay, Paul, I am ready to answer any questions that somebody might have typed in.
Well, thank you, Mr. Vega. We didn't have any live questions from any of our viewers, but can you think of anything you didn't cover that you might want to add? Any other tips?
Oh, let me think. Guys, I guess probably want to reemphasize to think positive. Think positive throughout the whole process, and don't take it so seriously. Now, I know that sounds contradictory to what I said earlier about being serious with the interview, but what I mean now at this very moment when I say don't take it so seriously, I mean relax, chill. All that's happening here is somebody has just invited you in to their living room, and they just want to know a little bit more about you. That's all. They're already impressed with you. They read your resume and your cover letter, and they're already impressed. So give them your best. Don't disappoint them. They like you already. So just keep on flowing from the portion of you that they already like, and be professional. Be very professional. And if something is bothering you that day, if you've had a bad day, a bad morning, whatever might have happened, please, you got to shake it off. You got to shake it off and say, "Ooh, okay, shake it off. It's showtime." And give it your best shot. And then after the interview, then you can go and bum out and take a nap or whatever you need to do to unwind. But just shake it off and go in there with a positive attitude. You can do it. And that they're looking for a good, positive person. Yeah. So please be positive.
Looks like we just had a question come in from Kay. Was a bit surprised when he talked about visiting like you were in their living room and addressed the interviewer by first name. Is that now the accepted method?
No, I think it always has been, at least from my perspective. At least from my perspective, I call myself an expert at this stage. This is a stage called the interview process, and a lot of people get very nervous and they just answer the questions and they leave. But from the interviewee perspective, when I was the interviewee, I would address them by their first name if I knew the first name, because all of a sudden they feel like, wow, I feel like I'm already working with this guy and he's talking to me and we're talking to each other. kind of relaxes them too. And uh, yeah, so I say, yeah, it, just do that if possible. Uh, maybe it sounds new because nobody has ever thought about it, but it's not new to me. But regardless, feel free to do that. It works.
Do you have any tips for overcoming what may seem like a lackluster resume if they seem concerned about your experience or education? How do you convince them that you're qualified enough?
Well, first of all, if it's a lackluster resume, more than likely you will not get called in. So if you get called in for the job interview, I think it's safe to assume that they like what's on the resume already. However, let me say this: if it's a lackluster resume and nobody's calling you, you might have to think about that. The reason nobody's calling you might be that you have a lackluster resume and cover letter. That's why you're not getting any phone calls. So if you don't contact me, contact somebody locally, somebody who's an expert at resume writing. A lot of times, the workforce centers at all states, every state's workforce center in their state governments. I know in Arkansas that we have a state workforce center, and oftentimes they offer free tips and advice and counseling on resume writing and cover letters. So if you feel that you're not getting called in, you might want to share your resume with somebody who knows about resumes. Have them look it over and have them give you some advice and feedback. And please accept their feedback because it might sound very unpleasant, but you need to listen to them because you might have some gaps on that in the resume, or you might have some wording that's not selling.
Thank you, and thank you for those resources as well. One last question. Would you say any of this advice changes if someone is applying for an in-house position? So the interviewers are people they already know and they're trying to get a promotion.
No, uh, no. In fact, I'm glad you asked that, Paul. I'm really glad you asked that because what I saw when I was working in human resources was that a lot of the people who applied for in-house jobs, and a lot of companies have a policy that says, before we open it up to the public, let's open up this job in-house and see what's available, especially the larger companies. And they're hoping that somebody from some other department is going to apply for their job. And what I've seen too often, again, thank you for asking that. What I've seen too often is that people think that just because they work for the company already, it's a shoe-in. They're going to get the job. And no, it's not true. They're going to look at you just like they view any other job candidate. If you don't impress them, they're not going to hire you, even if they know you. If they've seen you around or they've seen your name and they kind of know who you are, no, they're going to look at you and say, "Wow, I've seen this person. He seemed like a nice guy, but man, he really blew the interview." So yeah, I think it's just the opposite. They need to really
Mhm.
seriously think about putting on a good show during the interview and the resume and so on. And now the advantage I do have is that they may know the interviewers, may know them by name, so it'll be easier. They might feel a little more relaxed with the interviewers. So I hope that answered your question, Paul.
Yes. Well, thank you for your time, and I'm going to put up here on the screen your contact info in case anyone would like it, and I'll give you an opportunity to give any final remarks you'd like to share.
Overall, again, I can't overemphasize this. What's going to help you to relax is to just realize that this is not rocket science. They are people just like you. They have jobs just like you. They have performance reviews just like you. Uh, People talk about them. They talk about other people. I mean, they're just people like you. They have problems at home. They have challenges at home. They have problems when they're coming to work with flat tires or traffic. Again, they're just people like you. They're nothing special, regardless of their titles. They're just people like you. They too have a job. They too have a boss. They too have timelines to meet. So look at them that way, and it'll help you to relax.
Right. Well, thank you once again, and thank you everyone for watching, and those who watch in the future. And have a good night.
Good night. Good night.